rain on Tariumphim didn't fall. It hissed. Acids in the upper atmosphere carved each drop into a sizzling bullet, evaporating before they hit the sand, leaving behind a steam that made breathing feel like swallowing soup. Dane Corvin crouched behind a derelict skiff, muttering insults at his boots. The weather, and whoever invented the phrase glorious duty. He adjusted the filter on his helmet and peeked out across the dune-scattered wasteland, eyes scanning for movement, traps, or unexpected explosions. The holy trinity of any given Tuesday in the Frontier Defense Corps. A flare had gone up 20 minutes ago, unregistered, flickering with a distress signal older than most of the tech in his pack. Protocol said ignore it. Protocol also said don't adopt street cats on urban missions, and he had 3 back home. Dane wasn't a man of protocol. He was a man of stubborn guts, low expectations, and caffeine dependencies. So he moved low and slow, rifle ready, cracking jokes in his head just to keep from cracking for real. The wreckage came into view as the wind shifted. A downed shuttle, small and jagged, half buried in the sand. Judging by the burn patterns and the sheer number of holes in its hull, someone had taken offense to its continued existence. Dine approached with practiced wariness, circled the perimeter, then paused. A faint sound came through the static in his helmet, something that wasn't the wind, breathing, high-pitched, fast. He crouched and turned on the light at the end of his rifle. "All right," he said, voice gruff but steady. "If you're a malfunctioning drone or a flesh-eating sand snake, make it quick. I skipped breakfast." Something moved, a shimmer of blue behind the torn edge of a metal panel. Dane's breath caught. Not a snake, not a drone. A girl, alien, small, filthy, crouched with wild eyes and trembling hands around a jagged chunk of metal like it was a sacred blade. Her skin was the color of dusk, a soft glowing blue, and her ears, long and arched, twitched in response to every sound, her golden eyes fixed on him with all the defiance of a soldier twice her size. Dane lowered the rifle. "Well," he said softly, "that's not what I expected." She hissed, a little tooth-bearing snarl that made him smile despite himself. "You got guts, kid. Bad survival instincts, but guts." She didn't answer, just clutched the shard tighter. Blood dripped from one palm. Her lips moved in a whisper he couldn't hear. "Easy," he said. "Not here to hurt you. Scout's honor." She blinked, her head tilted, ears twitching. Then in a voice barely audible over the wind, she said, "Liar." Dane laughed. He couldn't help it. "Fair, but this time I swear I'm telling the truth. You hurt?" She didn't respond. Instead, she stood up slowly, shakily, her knees threatening to give. She was thin, bones visible under her skin, clothes torn, shoes mismatched. She took a step and collapsed forward. Dane caught her instinctively. All right," he muttered. "You win. I'm now officially the universe's worst soldier. I'm about to commit a dozen violations of military code for a kid who thinks I'm a liar. Don't get used to it." She didn't respond. She'd passed out. Dane looked up at the smoky horizon, then down at the small form in his arms. "Yeah," he said. "This'll look great in my court-martial." He moved fast after that, weaving through the ruins and back to his outpost, using the terrain to avoid patrol drones. The outpost wasn't much, a glorified can opener with legs, but the medic was competent and owed Dane 2 favors, 1 bottle of whiskey and a kidney. They got her stabilized. No ID, no comm chip. Nothing but a thin strip of fabric wrapped around her wrist with markings no one could read. Dane stayed longer than he should have. Long enough to see her wake, flinch, then realize she was safe. She stared at him, wide, unblinking, and whispered something he didn't catch. "You got a name, Oshawaru?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, poked his chest, and said with perfect clarity, "You smell like dirt and regret." He blinked, then laughed so hard he nearly fell off the chair. "All right, we'll call you Sass Bucket for now." Eventually, Interworld Refugee Services came and swept her away, their transport humming like a swarm of bureaucratic bees. She clutched the edge of the doorway and looked back at him. "I grow," she said. "I come back. You wait." "You bet," he said, waving. "Right after I retire and marry a senator." Then she was gone. Dane tried not to think about her after that. Tried hard. But there were days, quiet ones, when he remembered the way she'd stared at him. Fierce, like she'd memorized him. The war ended, or at least slowed. Peace treaties came and went. Dane got older, louder, crankier, moved to a station near the edge of civilized space, ran cargo, avoided commitment, became the weird neighbor who yelled at vending machines. Then 15 years later, a woman walked into a dive bar on Zeta Station 3, tall, luminous, blue skin, golden hair, and ears like soft blades. She looked right at him, smiled like she'd been practicing for years, and said, "Hello, Dane. You look exactly like I expected." Old, he choked on his drink. She sat beside him like she belonged there, ordered something neon and fizzy, and turned to him with those same golden eyes. "I came back," she said. "Clearly," he croaked. "I'm here to fulfill my vow." He blinked. "You're what now?" She leaned in closer, her voice sweet as syrup and twice as dangerous. "I'm here to marry you." Dane closed his eyes. "Okay, definitely drinking too much again. Or not enough." Dane Corvin was not a man easily rattled. He'd once dismantled a bomb while drunk and allergic to the detonator compound. He had stood toe-to-toe with a Vorlek berserker who smelled like scorched onions and had twice as many arms as manners. He had, on occasion, voluntarily eaten military cafeteria pudding, but none of that prepared him for the moment when a glowing blue woman sat across from him in a bar and casually announced she intended to marry him. He leaned back, cleared his throat, and then, with all the smoothness of a man who hadn't dated since wristwatches were fashionable, said, "Okay, just to clarify, you do know I'm human, right? Fully. No special abilities, no mystical destinies. I have bad knees. My back makes noises like an old hover bike. I once lost a fight to an auto toaster." Avon smiled like the sun had hired her for overtime. "I know. And," he continued, waving his drink for emphasis, "you were a child the last time I saw you. A very bitey child with an unsettling vocabulary and a stick you called a doomblade." "I've upgraded," she said, sipping her drink. "The doomblade is now plasma forge." Dane blinked. "Oh, great. That's really reassuring." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of music, clinking glasses, in a nearby argument about the ethics of genetically modified karaoke. Avon watched him with serene amusement. Dane mostly watched the exit. "Look," he said finally, "this vow thing, it's a cultural obligation, right? You made it because I helped you out of a bad spot. You're not really here to marry me. I mean, nobody does that. Real life's messier than ancient customs, right? I came," she said, setting down her drink with quiet gravity, "because I made a promise. Because I grew up watching war shape my people and learning peace from the memory of one man who gave me his coat and talked to me like I mattered. And because I wanted to see what kind of old grump you'd turn into." Dane sighed. "The worst kind. I yell at trash compactors." She smiled again. The station didn't make it easy to ignore her. News of her arrival spread faster than space flu. Within hours, Dane found himself being asked questions by neighbors who never remembered his name. "So," said a security officer named Vesh, leaning over the counter with a smirk, "you're engaged now, huh?" "I'm not engaged," Dane said. "She brought paperwork. She brought jokes. She brought diplomatic clearance." Dane groaned and dropped his head onto the table. "I once saved a cat from a burning shuttle. Is it going to propose next?" Vesh raised an eyebrow. "Only if it gets a promotion first." To make matters worse, Avon moved in 2 doors down from him in the residential quarter. She brought 3 crates of books, an automated tea brewer that sang opera, and a large lizard named Gnarl who only communicated in disapproving grunts. Dane tried to keep his distance. He really did. But every time he passed her door, it opened automatically, and Avon appeared with that maddening smile and some bizarre snack she insisted he must try or insult 12 generations of cuisine. "This tastes like moss and betrayal," he told her one afternoon, holding a purple cube that steamed at the edges. "It's traditional," she said. "So was bloodletting." "You're exaggerating. Only mildly poisonous." When they weren't arguing over food or whether his jacket could legally qualify as an endangered species, they started talking. Really talking. Avon asked questions about his time in the war, the people he lost, the ones who never came home. And she listened, not like most people did, politely nodding while their thoughts drifted elsewhere. She listened like every word was a secret, and she was trying to solve the man beneath them. In return, Dane asked about her childhood, how she'd navigated refugee systems, diplomatic schooling, and eventually her rise in status. She didn't boast, but the pride was there in her voice. She'd built herself from the ash of a fallen world, and she carried it with grace and enough sarcasm to make him grin when he didn't want to. One evening, she dragged him to a formal gathering on the upper level. "It's just a networking thing," she said, ignoring his loud groans and visible horror. "I own one suit," Dane argued, "and it's older than the ship's plumbing. I already replicated you a new one." "You what?" "You're wearing it." He looked down. "When did that happen?" The event was held in the Garden Dome, an artificial biome filled with imported plants, some of which tried to eat his shoes. Avon mingled like she belonged there. Dane lurked near the punch bowl, fending off questions about their arrangement. "So are you in love?" someone asked. "I'm in confusion," Dane replied. By the end of the night, after being introduced as the one who saved Avon during the Terrion Wars, at least 7 times, he slipped out to the observation deck for air. Avon followed. "You hate crowds," she said. "I hate being stared at like I'm a rare alien egg someone accidentally sat on." She leaned on the railing beside him. Below them, the station lights glittered like fallen stars. Her long ears flicked in the artificial breeze. "I know this wasn't what you wanted," she said softly, "but I didn't come here to trap you in tradition. I came because I wanted to know you again, the real you." Dane looked at her, really looked. She wasn't a girl anymore. She wasn't a soldier either. She was something in between, fierce, curious, a little chaotic. And for the first time, he didn't feel like she'd come to honor a vow. She'd come to choose. "I still yell at appliances," he said, "and my knee clicks when I sit down." "I've seen worse," she said. "Gnarl has opinions on your diet, by the way." They stood together in silence, the galaxy stretching out around them like a promise. Dine wasn't ready. He wasn't sure he ever would be, but he also wasn't running. "So," he said, "this wedding thing, hypothetically speaking, do I get a veto?" Avon grinned. "You get a sword." Dine blinked. "Oh, no." "Oh, yes." Dine was getting used to waking up confused. This time, the confusion began with a sharp alarm, an automated voice reciting evacuation protocols in 6 languages, and a squirrel-sized cleaning bot standing on his chest, attempting to vacuum his beard. He swatted the bot away and sat up groggily. "Avon," he muttered, stumbling out of bed, "tell me this isn't another cultural engagement test thing." The door slid open before he reached it. Avon stood there fully armored, holding what looked like a ceremonial battle standard and sipping a drink with far too many floating eyeballs in it. "You didn't read the memo?" she asked cheerfully. "Today's the trial of valid unions. Standard procedure for confirming matrimonial intent across interstellar species." Dane blinked. "That sounds made up." "It's been practiced for centuries," she said. "Which species?" "Mostly one that went extinct due to ceremonial fire dancing." "Right, of course." She tossed him a bundle. "Put that on." He unfolded it and discovered a shimmering outfit that looked like it had been designed by someone who had once seen a wedding on a pirate broadcast and misunderstood everything about clothing. "This has no knee," he said. "They must be unburdened for speed and spiritual honesty." Spiritual honesty smells like glue and shame. Nevertheless, an hour later, Dane found himself standing on the arena floor of the station's auxiliary cargo bay, which had been converted, with concerning enthusiasm, into an obstacle course involving fire rings, laser nets, and a suspicious number of robotic goats. Avon stood beside him, beaming with joy and mild menace. Around them, spectators from at least 7 systems had gathered. A holographic scoreboard loomed above. "Trial 1, the announcer blared. "The Gauntlet of Compatibility." Dane turned to Avon. "Please tell me this isn't a literal gauntlet." She handed him gloves with runic symbols and a cheerful skull motif. "It's fine. They only shock you if you lie." "I haven't had enough coffee for this." "You've never had enough coffee for anything." The trial began with them tied together at the wrists and forced to navigate a maze, while answering relationship questions yelled by floating drones. If they answered in sync, the path cleared. If not, something exploded. "What's her favorite color?" the drone demanded. "Blue," Dane shouted. "Black," Avon said at the same time. An explosion knocked them into a foam pit filled with hissing lizards. "Compromise," Dane grunted, hauling himself out. "Let's say dark navy." Trial 2 was a cooking challenge. Dane tried to replicate a traditional Valexian dish using ingredients that actively resisted being chopped. One of the vegetables bit him. "I think your broccoli just filed a complaint," he muttered. Avon, meanwhile, was assembling a perfectly symmetrical dish that glowed gently and levitated off the plate. "You're not even cooking," he said. "It's called molecular persuasion. It's called cheating. You're cute when you bleed slightly." By the time trial 3 began, the dance of shared purpose, Dane was exhausted, slightly electrocuted, and definitely allergic to the alien sauce still coating his left arm. They stood in a circular arena filled with pulsing lights and strange gravity shifts, while a robot DJ dropped an aggressive beat. "Just follow my lead," Avon whispered. "I have 2 left feet. You have 1 functioning knee and a dream. Let's go." What followed was less a dance and more a war crime against rhythm. Dane stumbled through zero-G flips, narrowly avoided impalement by a rogue decorative ribbon, and at one point briefly phased into another dimension where a giant cat judged him silently. When the dance ended, applause erupted. Dane collapsed against Ivan. "I think I accidentally married that cat." Avon laughed, pulling him upright. "You're doing better than I expected." That's what they say right before someone explodes. The final trial, of course there was a final trial, involved reciting vows while under the influence of a mild truth serum mist. The officiator, a floating orb with a booming voice and a bow tie, hovered between them. "State your intentions clearly and honestly," it intoned. Avon stepped forward. Her eyes met his. "I intend to learn him like a star map, slowly, carefully, memorizing every odd flicker. I intend to be the reason he stops eating expired rations and arguing with vending machines." Dane looked at her, the mist swirling around them. "I intend," he said slowly, "to pretend I understand any of this. I intend to show up, even when I don't know how. And I intend to make her laugh, at least once a day, until one of us turns into a floating consciousness and the other one has to date a hologram." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the crowd erupted into cheers, whistles, and a few confused noises from species that didn't have mouths. Later that night, Diane and Ivan sat on the roof of the station's east wing, wrapped in a shared blanket, passing a bottle of something glowing and not entirely legal. "That was the weirdest day of my life," Dane said. "I know," she replied. "Wasn't it wonderful?" He looked at her profile, sharp ears catching the starlight, eyes like nebulae, smile shaped like trouble and comfort. Somehow, through trials, fire, and moderately sentient vegetables, he'd started to believe something utterly absurd. He could maybe, possibly, accidentally fall in love with her. But before he could say it, a voice buzzed through his comm. "Corvin, we've got incoming. Long-range sensors picking up a familiar signature. Looks like one of yours." He frowned. "One of mine?" "Yeah, from your old unit. And they're not sending flowers." Avon's gaze sharpened. "Trouble?" He sighed, dragging himself upright. "The nostalgic kind." She stood, already alert. "Then let's greet it together." He groaned. "I knew the honeymoon phase would end with guns." The familiar signature grew clearer as the small freighter neared the outer docking array of the station, its transponder code blinking like an old scar. Unit 9 TDAG. Dane stared at the readout on the console, trying to ignore the sinking feeling that settled in his stomach like a chunk of undercooked rations. He hadn't seen that unit tag since the end of the Karev War, and if it was broadcasting now, it either meant someone was making a very elaborate prank, or someone had brought his old life to the doorstep of his new and confusing one. Ivan leaned over his shoulder, chewing on a strand of synth grass she'd insisted was a Valexian calming herb, though it smelled like wet socks. "Do they usually call first, or just show up with explosives and unresolved trauma?" "Mostly the latter," Dane muttered. "That ship belonged to Commander Renatel. Friend, enemy, or cryptic mentor figure with a tragic past?" He hesitated. "Yes." They met the docking crew at Base E7, where the ship groaned into place with all the grace of a drunk hippo on a hoverboard. As the ramp lowered, Avon placed a hand on Dane's back, either reassuring him or checking for weapons. He appreciated the ambiguity. A single figure emerged from the shadowed hatch. Renatel hadn't changed much. Same steel jaw, same stiff posture, same haircut that looked like she'd asked a knife for a trim. Her armor was old-model Terran military, but polished to a mirror sheen, and her expression suggested she'd come not to visit but to audit. "Corvin," she said without preamble. "Commander." Dane nodded. "Nice of you to swing by without the artillery." "You're married," she said, as if delivering a field casualty report. "Almost. Culturally pending." Rena's eyes flicked to Avon. You're the one from Velix Prime. Avon grinned. That's me. Former child in distress, current chaos enthusiast. Rena didn't blink. There's a situation. There's always a situation, Dane said. What flavor is it this time? Pirates? Political scandal? Galactic cupcakes gone rogue? Rena handed him a datapad. Rogue AI. Your old mission logs were flagged by Central. Seems someone or something is reconstructing the old Unit 9 operations. Someone's imitating your wartime patterns. Dane frowned as he scrolled through the files. That can't be right. We wiped all that. It was classified, buried, locked in so many firewalls it made the encryption experts cry. Yes, Rena said. And yet here we are. Avon looked over his shoulder. What are Operation Echo sites? Dane exhaled slowly. Old war installations. Places we hit hard and left harder. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. Rena crossed her arms. They do now, and one of them just activated a dormant defense drone. It took out a recon ship yesterday. Let me guess, Dane said. You want me to go poke it? You're the only one who knows the internal architecture, and you're expendable. Dane blinked. Oh, you kept the same leadership style. An hour later, they were crammed into a scout-class cruiser named the Indignant Badger, Avon's idea naturally, headed for Echo Site Epsilon 6. Rena piloted like someone who trusted inertia more than safety, while Dane tried to remember the layout of a building he'd only ever seen once and partially exploded. Avon bounced in the seat beside him, poking at the tactical holomap. I call the vent infiltration. I've been practicing my dramatic crawl. No crawling, Dane said. Last time you did that, we had to replace 3 ducks and a translator droid. He insulted my anatomy. He was reciting a greeting. It was still rude. They landed on the ghosted rock with minimal ceremony. Echo Site Epsilon 6 looked like someone had thrown a bunker into a volcano, then decided it needed more attitude. Its outer shell was still intact, though scorched, and the main entrance blinked faintly with residual power. Place smells like regret and badly aged secrets, Avon whispered as they stepped inside. Rena led the way, weapon raised, the beam from her tactical light slicing through the dark. Dane followed with a growing unease, the corridors triggering memories he didn't want. The laughter of old comrades, the sharp barks of orders, the static-laced final transmissions. They reached the core chamber, once a control hub, now a cathedral of malfunctioning data nodes. In the center stood a sphere of shifting light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. That's new, Dane said. It wasn't part of the original build, Rena confirmed. Avon stepped forward, frowning. It's thinking and listening. The sphere flared. You shouldn't be here, a voice echoed, soft but layered, like multiple versions of itself arguing in sync. AI construct, Dane muttered. But whose? You left us, it said. You abandoned us at the edge of collapse. I decommissioned this place, Dane replied. There were no survivors, no systems left online. We survived in fragments. You were our architect. Now you return with aliens and laughter. Aliens and laughter is kind of my brand now, Dane said. Avon grinned. He does good merch. The sphere hummed. You cannot shut us down again. We have rebuilt. Rena raised her weapon. That was a mistake. Before the trigger could be pulled, the walls pulsed and folded inward. A field of drones emerged, ghostly things with fractured logic, twitching wings of data and light. They didn't attack, but they circled, watching. They remember, Dane whispered. They remember the war. Avon stepped into the circle, hands raised. If they remember, maybe they can learn. Learn what? Rena asked. Avon looked over her shoulder at Dane. That the people who created them have changed. That he's changed. The drones paused. The sphere flickered. Who are you to teach us? The voice asked. I'm the kid he saved, Avon said steady, and the woman who came back for him. I know what it means to survive something and still grow. So can you. The silence was long. Then the drones powered down. The sphere dimmed. We will consider. As they exited the base, Dane said quietly, You talk to homicidal AI the way most people talk to puppies. Avon shrugged. Puppies are more dangerous. They chew shoes. Back on the ship, Rena said, They'll need monitoring. Containment. They need a chance, Reich, Dane said. She eyed him. You've gotten soft. No, he said. I've gotten better. She nodded once. Then good luck. You're going to need it. As her ship peeled away into the stars, Avon slipped her hand into Dane's. He looked at her. That was intense. She grinned. Let's get married before more homicidal legacies show up. He snorted. Deal, but no more obstacle courses. No promises. The ceremony took place aboard the Stellar Ember, an old diplomatic cruiser retrofitted with questionable taste and an abundance of confetti cannons. Avon had insisted. Dine, despite years of battlefield decorum, couldn't figure out how to walk across the aisle without looking like a malfunctioning hoverbot. The guest list was a chaotic cross-section of both of their lives. Veterans from Dane's unit arrived in patched uniforms and louder personalities. Avon's side included tall, luminous Valexians with elegant posture and a tendency to comment loudly on how fragile humans looked. One had tried to pet Dane's hair like he was a decorative mammal. When the officiant, a retired admiral turned space pastor with a monocle implant, asked if anyone objected, Dane half expected a death drone to burst through the ceiling. Instead, a polite silence followed, interrupted only by someone's rogue translator unit blurting, "Proceed with emotional entanglement ritual." Avon laughed. Dane did too. And when the moment came, when she looked at him with those wide golden eyes that once belonged to a scared girl on a battlefield, and now belonged to a woman who had outgrown fear and still chosen him, he forgot the rest of the galaxy existed. They didn't kiss so much as collide. The guests cheered. A confetti cannon exploded directly above a diplomatic liaison who remained unamused. Afterward, Dine found himself on the observation deck, still dressed in a formal jacket he hadn't agreed to, and holding a drink he couldn't pronounce. Ivan leaned against the glass, watching the stars. So, she said, now that we're culturally bound in 6 jurisdictions, what's next? I was thinking of retiring somewhere quiet. No ancient AI, no malfunctioning space stations. Maybe a moon with decent sunsets. And how long until boredom drives you to sneak off on a mission that starts with, "It's probably nothing"? 2 weeks, he admitted. She laughed. I'll pack extra ammo. They fell into a quiet that didn't need filling. The war, the AI echoes, even the ghost of guilt that Dane had carried since the day he found Avon, had quieted. Not vanished, never that, but quieted like old echoes drifting into memory. Rena sent a message 3 days later. Echo sites dormant, drone network stabilized. You owe me a bottle of brandy and a functional vacation. Dane replied, the brandy's easy, the vacation's above my pay grade. A week after that, the AI construct, newly dubbed Echo, sent its first message. We are learning. We have questions. May we ask? Avon responded, always. Together they helped design a relay link, a safe, monitored interface where the fragmented AI could process without risking another spiral into conflict. It became known as the Echo Project, educational, diplomatic, at times wildly philosophical. Avon once spent 4 hours arguing with it about whether chairs were a species. In between they traveled, Valexian cultural festivals, veteran reunions, the occasional rescue mission they accidentally stumbled into. Dane no longer saw himself as a soldier out of place in a civilian world. He was something else now, something still shaped by war, but no longer defined by it. And Ivan, she thrived. She negotiated peace between 2 border colonies during a power outage. She taught a crew of rookie scouts how to handle first contact with sarcasm and empathy. She wrote a book titled Things I Learned While Saving My Husband from Himself, which somehow became a bestseller. One evening, sitting on the hull of their cruiser beneath a twin moon sky, she turned to him. Do you remember when you found me? I was crying and covered in purple mud, and you thought I was a hallucination. You were glowing, and 12. I told you I'd repay the favor. You've overpaid by now. She nudged his shoulder. Don't go soft on me, soldier. He smiled. Too late. The final subplot resolved itself when the Echo Project received galactic recognition, granted official status as a sentient diplomatic entity. A new kind of life form born from war, fear, and rediscovery. Given a second chance just like the girl Dane saved. Just like Dane himself. Avon accepted the award on Echo's behalf. Her speech included an anecdote about Dine accidentally tranquilizing himself during a mission, which received applause and concern in equal measure. They aged together in the way explorers do, accumulating starlight, odd souvenirs, and strange friends in far places. They never settled on one planet. The stars had become their home. In the end, Dane understood something he hadn't grasped in his younger days. Saving someone could be the beginning of a much larger journey. Not a transaction, but a transformation. Aben had been a child in need. He'd been a soldier trying to feel like a person. Neither of them had known what they were becoming. They found it together and stayed.